It's 4:30, and this is the City of Snoqualmie Parks and Public Works Committee meeting. Um, our chair, Ethan Benson, is away today, so I will be hosting this meeting for you. So um, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order and roll call of both myself and Councilmember Holloway today. Next on the agenda is this meeting's agenda approval.
I have no changes.
No changes. I have no changes, so we'll approve this meeting's agenda. The meeting is next is public comments. There will be no online public comments taken today, so anybody that is present is certainly welcome to testify, but seeing that there is nobody in the audience except for staff members, we'll go ahead and proceed forward to the next item, which is approval of the last meeting's minutes dated June 4th, 2024. Any changes?
I have no changes. Move to approve.
Second that, and we'll approve those previous minutes. Moving on to agenda bills, we have Agenda Bill 24075, the 2025-2030 non-utilities capital improvement plan, CIP. And it looks like we have
Dylan Gamble,
CIP manager Dylan Gamble presenting.
Good evening, committee. I'm going to gather my belongings here and make sure I'm presenting properly. Here we go. Thanks for that, Amy. Okay, wonderful. So I will begin. This is several iterations actually into the utility rate study. We're making good progress, so I just wanted to get that going right from the beginning. There's lots to discuss, and a project like this and the scale and scope is pretty difficult to wrap your head around all in one sitting. So I first just want to say thank you for working through this with me. And to jump right in, I'd like to tell you about the changes that would have happened between the last time you got a paper copy of this and now. First and foremost, you received an email with a digital version of these. However, I printed them because I didn't give you enough time to print them. So first is that. The second one is that you'll have a sheet that looks like this, and this is the change log. And so what I've done is when we had the previous agenda bills, and I will dig more into these in a second, AB 24068 and 069, I believe. Yes, the sidewalk and Kimball Street bridges, those both had an impact to the starting fund balance of the transportation fund, restricted use funds. And so they had an impact into the 25-30 CIP. We discussed that in both of those agenda bills that there was going to be consequences. You saw kind of like a rough guess as to what that was going to be, but this change log shows our draft proposal on how to achieve that and stay consistent with the intent of the CIP as you saw previously. So what you'll notice is on the left side of this, it's a request if a council made a request or if it was a decision made by council, such as the approval of the agenda bills. In the middle, I try to capture where and what things are impacted. So as you've heard me call it out, I call these worksheets, project worksheets. And then this was the overview of the revenue and expenditures. And so everything that has an impact to a worksheet has an impact to both. And so I almost always just say both, but generally I try to call out what specifically is changing and why, what the impact was, and roughly what the changes are. The first thing I kind of would like to jump into is just to work through the change log numbers 5 through 8, which is essentially the impacts from those two agenda bills. The first one is the reduction of a few of the programs in 2025. So these are transportation specific programs. So utilizing that transportation restriction fund, specifically looking at street resurfacing, sidewalk improvements, ADA, and complete streets programs. All four of those, you'll notice a dip in 2025 with a recovery after that. So essentially we dipped the 25 programs slightly by a different amount for each because they have varying amounts of funding to each of them. The street resurfacing is quite a bit larger than the complete streets, for example. So we tried to match that dip equivalent to the size of the fund or comparable to the size of the fund. The next big change is
Wait a minute,
yes,
back up.
yeah, no problem. What would you like me to get into?
Councilmember Holloway.
Thank you. What I don't see here, it says reduction of street services program. Let's just take 5.
Okay.
American Disabilities Act, complete streets. By how much?
Yes. That number is a little bit funny to get into, and I can explain why real quick, which is roughly that we took some number down, and then we also had to rebalance labor. Once we had to rebalance all the labor, it gets kind of difficult to tease apart those two numbers. So there's several things changing, and it was going to be a very complicated read to write it into the changes. So I figured that the easiest way to look at that would be to review between the two different CIPs, and I'm happy to print one out and go directly to it. But there's several changes that are impacting each other, and it makes for kind of a Rube Goldberg machine of impacts. And that's why I didn't describe it out in super detail there. But roughly speaking, we had to cover something like 619,000 is the overruns from the two agenda bills. And to cover that, we did most of it from the those programs, and then a little bit in delays of the next ones, which I can get into, but that's not an exact answer. And I can give you those exact numbers and break out the difference in labor, but the labor one is extensive across the entire chart.
Okay, but you gave me an essay answer.
Yeah.
I asked you a math question.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I will always ask you that math question.
Mm-hmm.
So could you please add a column in here of what is the dollar figure change as a result of whatever change is being described here? I have no problem with the description. I just want to know where the dollars are going back and forth.
Okay.
Single number math question.
Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask a complication maybe, or just a way to move forward on it?
Yeah.
Is since we have the labor impact as well as the others, would you like me to show just the changes between the last version you saw into this one, not every step in the way? Would you like to see a very complicated breakdown of every impact?
No, I mean, we can get into the detail. You should try to keep me away from those numbers. But just at the level of what number 5 is.
Yeah.
You said $619,000
in total in several ways. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So however that, the pluses and minuses, all that up, number 5 represents a $619,000 change.
Gotcha. I understand. Yeah. Showcase the difference in dollar figures. 2 minutes to run and grab a pen. Oh, yeah. Would you like me to keep going?
Yes, please.
Okay. The second item, which is number 6 on this list, is the delay of the Meadowbrook Bridge restoration project. We went into this to some extent, and Hin spoke to this mostly, but I'll reiterate, which is that we were aware of some timing benefits that the delay might have to working with the King County revetment project, which is right next to the abutments of our bridge. So this delay doesn't represent the biggest choice. For example, we didn't take all the funding. We obviously split it across multiple things, but we took advantage of 2 moments. One, that we needed funding now, and that this project would benefit from a delay to match with that other project. So it's a bit of a twofold answer there. The consequences are that we moved it in time. And when we did that, we had to escalate the project to account for the inflation that would happen over the years 25 to when we moved it to in 28. And so that is the next impact. Moving right along to the third one, which is the delay of the River Trail Boardwalk. This is a similar type thing where we delayed it off the tail end of the CIP, essentially. So instead of having the project existing in 29 and 30, we have delayed part of it off of the tail end of the CIP. So we only have 1 year in the CIP. And the other detail is that we took advantage of the funding that exists back in 2030 and swapped the starting in the second year. So essentially in 29, there was 900 and I could find it, 971,000 was in the first year, and then the following year would have 1,488,000. Instead, what we did is we started 2030 with 1,488,000, and then we will follow it up with the balancing that's appropriate when we get closer. That's a 2030 to 31 project. Cost escalation can kind of have some pretty wild variances between now and then. So this is really just a pretty distant looking engineer's estimate as it stands. So that's the consequences of that last one, essentially pushing something off the edge of the chart that we're not accounting for anymore and moving some numbers around in time to just try to get the project moving along swifter when we get there. And then the last one, which is, I would say, the most complicated, is a rebalancing of the labor costs, which are associated with each and every project and program. So as you scroll through any of your individual worksheets, you'll notice a column that's called labor. Mm-hmm. And that's essentially how we cover the cost of staffing across all of our projects and programs. That gets balanced by how much the project or the program itself costs. So we basically add up all the projects and programs and divvy up the labor costs amongst those projects based on the total cost. And so there's an exception to that, and I'll get to it. And but more or less, whenever we delay things in time, or we increase the size or scope of a project, it kind of forces us to rebalance the labor all over again. If, for example, street resurfacing represents 12% of a budget in 1 year, 2025, let's say, if we change how much every project gets in that year, then we change what percentage it comes from labor. So it essentially, that's what I meant by that Rube Goldberg machine. All those consequences get laid out with the exception that the community center has a specific labor number attached to it, which is the error that I accidentally included in our agenda packet. And so that is why I printed you a new one, is to primarily capture that inaccuracy. It got rebalanced and it shouldn't have. Moving too fast.
So that labor could be potentially contractor's labor, or is it just city's labor?
Just city staff, yep.
Okay.
So we have certain city staff attached to the non-utility capital fund. So okay. they do this work, and this is how we pay for them doing this work.
Okay.
It's essentially that line item that we pay the staff out of. And then the last one, final one, is that the railroad crossings improvements. This is the one where we're working with the Northwest Railway Museum to do the railway and road safety improvements at both King Street and the Parkway along 202. This is the crossings safety improvements. They were included in a agenda bill and a budget amendment in this current CIP, and they just didn't get captured because they're part of a budget amendment, and I missed it. It's a pretty small amount of funding. It's all grant funding, which is wonderful, so we don't want to lose track of it. And this is just me making sure that we're dialed in and added back. That did add labor costs into it. That's kind of the deal with the state grant, is they want to know what we're participating in it. And the answer is we manage a lot of the grant and a lot of the work to get through it. And so that's the labor cost that is associated. So when we added that, I had to readjust a little bit as well. And that is the end of the changes here in terms of the change log and all the projects within it. However, this is still, again, quite a topic. And so we can go into any details, but I'll pause there.
I had a question just on the packet that got sent out. Yep. With the agenda packet, and it's under Hin's projects for the Meadowbrook Bridge Restoration
Mhm.
project, which understand that, and it's on page 12 of the agenda packet. But
Okay.
then on page 13, it was titled a railroad crossing project. And it was all the same information on the Meadowbrook Bridge.
Yep, inaccurate. I'm sorry. That's one thing I meant to capture is part of that railroad crossings. I basically had them incorrectly labeled. And so in your worksheets here,
Yeah,
that's now fixed.
okay. And
Yeah.
then following was the Complete Streets Improvement Program and it showed the railroad crossing there as far as making that safe and stuff like that too, so.
Okay.
So, okay, so the stuff you handed out then is the updated of all that, so.
Yes, it captures the minor errors that kind of happened in between the transition.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, thank you.
But if you notice anything in these, please let me know. I can make
Okay.
small edits, especially if it's just to corrections. I have again went through and proofreaded it, but there's a lot to these packets.
Oh, yeah.
So we've all been proofreading these things. And if you were reviewing this thing like I have been, I feel like I have it memorized just about, and that's kind of what leads to some of those nitpicky errors.
Okay.
That I need to get to.
Perfect. Thank you.
To help me out with, let's go back to number 5. So this is a change log really between this and this. These two versions of the,
I presume, yes, I don't know what you have in your hand there. I think you're holding the tip, is why I mentioned it, but. Sorry, I know the color. I should really just get a better color palette. So there is 2 tips. They look almost identical. On the very top, one will say basically
June.
standard, and one will say edits with the state. And I'll get to that when we get to the tip. I have an explanation for trying to help out.
So, and I also had just a quick question on the under the estimated uses for the non-utility CIP. The debt service for 2026 is 5.7 million, whereas the other years it ranges from 200 to 700,000 or so. The 5.7 million, is that the line of credit?
Yeah.
5.2, I believe.
Mhm.
5.2 is the line of credit for 25.
Yeah, but this one says 5.733. Last line, 2026.
Yes, and that's so to try to tease it apart, there's another location that might help clarify. If you go up to the revenue section of the chart,
Yeah,
there is a orange kind of such section of lines. If you go down to 25, you'll see the line of credit 5,200.
5,200,000.
million.
And that's under 25. That's under
It
25.
is, and so part of that is that's the when we're estimating the line of credit to roll in, and then we're proposing to use the line of credit into the bond, which would come in 26. Down at the bottom, the debt servicing is how we pay for all these things. And so the line of credit has a different repayment than the bond. And so it's kind of getting a bit more complicated. I'm sure Janet can bring you right into the details, but I just want to make sure that was.
Okay, no, I just wanted to make sure that that's where I was tracking it from as far as it involved with that. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
Anything else on the non-utility CIP?
Not this time.
So this has already gone to council, or were we waiting for the edits to push it through the last meeting? I'm trying to remember.
Well, if we're tracking with our schedule that we went for, this upcoming council meeting would be the adoption of this, is how it's called out, and that's why there's an agenda bill attached.
Right.
It's still, very clearly until council makes a decision, it's not adopted, right? But the current schedule would be that it would be adopted for
So we'll,
council meeting.
so
It
we
has
should,
been reviewed.
so we'll push this forward again on the non-consent agenda. since
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
gonna
it would not
discuss
go on
it.
consent.
Yeah. Anything else on this?
There's lots, but I feel like I only want to answer questions. I don't want to have to. There's so much I could get into. It's quite a document, but I try to be respectful of the time, especially given that we started early.
All right, shall we move on to Agenda Bill 23-76, the Water Reclamation Facility Phase 3 Improvements Project Update and Contract Change Order Number 1.
Andrew Vining, our project engineer who's managing that project, is going to give this presentation.
Good evening, Parks and Public Works Committee. This agenda bill seeks to provide an update to the water reclamation facility in phase 3 improvements and approval of construction change order number 1. Construction is approximately halfway complete, and this includes construction of a new blower building, retrofit of the oxidation basin, and installation of city purchased electrical gear and headwork screen. The changes in change order 1 include the largest of them is for 2 catwalk extensions necessary for operators to safely access some of the new equipment being installed. Also included are several cost savings scope changes, including elimination of fencing and a new water line. With this change, the construction contract will be increased by $99,520, which is approximately 1% of the total construction costs. A PowerPoint I'm going to move through here pretty quickly, but I want to share some pictures from construction. Quick recap, the scope of this project. The bulk of it is at the oxidation ditch. The headworks includes the new screen, which the city purchased, and that's been installed. Kimball Creek Lift Station, which is at the end of the parkway. That portion of the project has been delayed until 2025 due to electrical gear. And then the solids handling facility is yet to be completed. That'll be scheduled for this fall. Overall schedule, I provided an update at the beginning of this year. No major changes to that schedule. The overall project is moving ahead of schedule. So we're looking at startup this summer, which is exciting, and the improvements at the site will be completed at the end of this year. The before and after, some of the structural and mechanical improvements at the basin. This is a couple weeks ago, starting up the new aeration system. We're switching from mechanical to fine bubble diffusers. And overall highlights, there's been excellent collaboration between the design team, the construction team, and the city operators. That's been critical, and there's been next to that, we've got interim plan operations. Maintaining operations is important, and having that collaboration is critical. A lot of the changes that we're seeing here are related to retrofit work. So there's equipment that requires modification, and it's you don't anticipate some of these changes. And then overall budget status, there's some pretty big numbers here, but again, this change order is for $99,000 to the construction contract, which will increase the construction cost by approximately 1%. The overage in the biennial budget spending is related to the acceleration in the contractor schedule. It's a big number, but part of the contractor moving quicker is that the cash flow is moving faster in this budget cycle. Overall life of the project is approximately $528,000, and that
relates back to our original bids. When we bid this a year ago, they came in approximately 10% over our engineer's estimate. And we're still seeing that in our total budget costs.
Okay.
Overall, we've got 1% change orders with 50% of the project complete, which is a good, I think, a good milestone to hit.
Sorry.
All right, council member Holloway, I know you're interested in budget, so I just quick recap on our budget slide here. Life of the project is about 3% over. The big numbers we're seeing an over for the biennial budget relates to the contractor's acceleration and schedule. And then overall, we're 50% complete with 1% in construction change orders. So next step, we'll be starting up the new process this summer. In fall of 2025, we'll be completing the WRF site improvements, including the solids handling facility. And then summer 2025 will be the Kimball Creek lift station, which is waiting on electrical gear that the contractor has procured.
Okay.
And with that, if you have any
question.
questions.
So part of this is 2 gantryways that need to be extended for safe operation of the facility.
That's correct.
Meaning the design as originally submitted had an unsafe condition in it?
It would have required bringing additional equipment on site that was not rental equipment.
To work in those areas instead of being able to access from the over.
Yes. So those catwalks, if you can see the 2 blue pipes there sticking through the wall,
Yeah.
the other side of that, there's pumps that can be lifted up. The original design includes a crane to lift those pumps, but in order for operators to man the lines to physically go through the process of lifting those pumps and getting them back set requires a catwalk. We've gone back and forth. How are there other means to do this? And the catwalk is the best safe solution.
Otherwise, you'd have to rent a crane every time you did this.
Be careful of your wordage, okay? If you're telling me this was designed with an unsafe condition, I'm going to ask you why you didn't go back to the designer on his errors and omissions to recoup some costs. It's not unsafe. You've decided a different method in which you want to do the maintenance, which is better for staff. That's on us. Okay, but I just want to make, again, if you're going to tell me it's unsafe, I'm going to ask for you to go back on those errors and omissions and get some money back.
I don't know if it was an unsafe condition. I think that when we did the design, our engineer developed the design in conjunction with our operators. And so the design that we bid was, we thought, the appropriate level of design for safety. Now, actually having built the thing and they're reviewing it, I think that our operators, and Andrew, correct me if I get this messed up, but our operators looked at it and they said, well, we don't really feel safe working over this ditch, you know, trying to manhandle these pumps on the rare occasions when we have to actually physically handle them and remove them for service. I think that the plan was to rent equipment to remove those.
I think the other alternatives would be either rent the equipment or to, we have redundancy in basins, take the basin offline and then go down to access the equipment.
And how often do you have to take these pumps out?
I don't know. It's yearly, about once a year, maybe.
I would say hopefully less than that.
Maybe less than that, yeah.
Less, what, hopefully, wait a minute, hopefully less than that? That threw me. I mean, hopefully more than that.
Hopefully less.
As in, less frequent.
Less frequent.
It's if you recall, we replaced the headwork screen to reduce ragging. That's paper towels that get flushed.
Yeah.
One of our concerns in the design, which we discussed heavily, was the potential for these pumps to get ragged. There is a redundant pump, but they're critical equipment, and if both of them were to go down, that would not be good. So the idea is that one can carry the load, the other one would be lifted, serviced. Is the intent.
Yeah, their information.
Just a note that this change order includes catwalks for both basins. So a lot of the changes in this change order are things that were identified during equipment submittals, requests for information in the first phase. We're halfway through. We're going to recreate that on the second half, but these costs capture both sides of the basin. So there's that factor there.
Okay. So we're going to move the change order number 1 with Prospect Construction forward to the next council meeting and
Non-consent.
non-consent. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
The tribe should be happy, right? Everything's on schedule or ahead of schedule. All right, next up is Agenda Bill 24-072, the 25 to 30 Transportation Improvement Plan. I'm assuming CIP manager
CIP manager
Gamble.
Dylan Gamble.
Back up there.
Well, again, yes. So yeah, I was gonna say, right from the get-go. Well, first off, where we are and what we've done. So this has gone through one Public Works committee, the past one, and then it went to the most recent council meeting, and now it's back for this one. In theory, it would follow along and go back to the next council meeting where it is proposed to be adopted with a public hearing on the next council meeting, which is the 24th. The situation where we stand and why you have two versions, essentially, they look very similar. The distinction is one, for the agenda packet, went back to the previous Parks and Public Works Committee document, the one I gave you then. That is now that was what's been included in the packet. I printed you both just for ease of use. And then I have given you another one, which says, with edits from 6/4/2024. And what the intent of that is to show, well, first off, there was some distinct errors in the document that you received in front of council, and that is my fault. And so what I wanted to do is make it very clear kind of what I took from that and to go back and re-review the recommendations that were given at that meeting and try to be very clear and showcase those changes. So I tried to get you to what should have been on the council meeting that was not. And a bit of an explainer on what happened in between. Simply, I got a little too wrapped up in the CIP and what funding was available, but this document is referencing adopted funds. So the 23-28 CIP. There is no 25-30 CIP yet. We're still working right through it. So my brain took me right to, this is already funded, yada, yada. Let me correct for it, make some edits and changes. And I definitely got ahead of myself and I apologize for that. And that's what led to part and maybe most of the confusion. So apologies there. What I've tried to do here is bring us back to what you actually asked me to do and nothing of what I have added. I will say that I did hear additional comments at the council meeting that were not part of that Public Works Committee. I did not change those on here, but I do know of them and I could harken back to those if you'd like, just to make sure that we don't kind of run into that again at the council meeting. But essentially, as I was told from the previous Public Works Committee meeting, is to add the railroad crossings improvements to the tip list, which is at the very bottom. and to change the complete streets priority to match up with the other programs, which I also did. And there may be some anomalous bits with the conversation. I think we said something like the programs are 1, 2, 3, 4, so make complete streets 5. And what I did was streets, sidewalks, and ADA are 17, 18, 19, and I made complete streets match. So that is the intent there. That is all that I changed, and I am happy to hear further review or edits or corrections. I can also get into some of the confusion that occurred maybe around the council meeting to discuss how this document's aligned and laid out and what's needed to move it forward and what is here for ease of use in review and ease of use in actually just ease of use in review and looking at the document.
Councilmember Holloway, any questions?
I'm trying to track the numbers and so, but so there are changes from what was introduced in the agenda package and what is here today.
There is, if you're looking at the one with edits, that's the one where I tried to show the changes that you recommended me add between Public Works and last council meeting. And
Okay.
I added additional stuff, which is the incorrect part.
So we'll have to make a motion in council to substitute this new with edits in for the for what was introduced in last council.
If you want those edits, yes. Yeah. I just wanted to step us back, make sure we're on the right footing. But yes, I think that I'm not the expert on the procedures. I'm afraid I'll have to yield to the clerk or the city attorney on whether it's a motion or a substitution.
Well, once you introduce it becomes frozen. Unless there's some action to change it. And a motion to substitute.
But I'm only not sure because there's 2 council meetings. The first one was just first review. Second one's the public hearing. I really am not 100% sure here, but whatever is necessary,
So
I'll do it on my end. So
this will be at the round table and at the first meeting next Monday. The 6 o'clock meeting, is that what you're saying?
Well, wait. So no, if the last council meeting was just a discussion, this doesn't matter. If it was introduced with the intent of subsequent approval on the next council meeting, it was introduced. And from there on, if you want to make changes to it, you need to make motion for change, motion for substitution. Once you introduce it in the record, there has to be an overt action to change it.
Right.
Not just it changes between these 2 meetings.
And then
It's a total nitpick thing.
so we can basically pass this forward.
You pass it forward and in next council do a motion to substitute with the edits as discussed in last council and Public Works. Motion to substitute this new list in for the exhibit.
Sounds good.
I can do whatever you need to on the back end.
It'd be
confirm
either
with legal if you
Kat
like.
or myself would have to do that.
Okay.
You're the chair this week, so.
Oh, so stuff rolls uphill, I guess.
Have a comment?
Yes, Mayor.
So one item that was brought up by one of the council members was the Meadowbrook Bridge repair or replacement, showing outside funding for 20 million. I think we were going to somehow identify that we really don't have that funding yet, right?
Right. Yes. Thank you for bringing this up. This is one of the deliberations Jeff and I were having about how to make sure this is aligned. This is directly from what we have approved previously. With the same fund, we also did not have funding for the total rebuild last time as well, or the times before that, because this project has been on here for several years. So I left it as is, assuming that the intent was it was written appropriately then. Why change it now when I was not explicitly told to do so? More just a question about how this tip was laid out. So I will say that the way that the tip is reviewed by the state is just to make sure that we capture our intents in here. And so this project, as it's written, can be reworded to better reflect that the fully funding part of it is dependent. And so, yes, that could be clarified. And in fact, I'm sorry, this edit was made to the edits one. This is one of the linguistic choices. If you switch to the edits one, it says fully funding, dependent on fully funding. So I'm glad you brought that up because this is the one change that I made to the words.
Because the 20 million would be the bridge replacement.
That's
Yes.
correct.
Yeah,
Was-
as
we
we
were
know it
looking
now.
at the from one end of the scale to the other type of a thing. And I know that the state doesn't hold us to these. These don't have to go forward. It's just to lay out the
To be
potential.
fair to them holding us accountable, they will if it's not on here.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely will. So if we go and ask for a grant and we say, we want to rebuild this road, and they go, great, show me your tip, and then we'll just be smooth here. And it's not on this list, they will tell us, like, doesn't seem like you've really wanted this for very long. So that's one risk. And so having it on here is the real critical part.
Yeah.
And I would recommend that if we wanted to be really specific, we could split this into two projects. One is a repair and one is a replacement. And then I could correct for the total funds and outside funding and local funding. Or we could leave it as is. It doesn't seem to be in conflict with anything. We have applied for grants for full funding of replacement of the bridge. We didn't receive it, but this is not what they flagged as the problem. I hope that clarifies, but I'm happy to make edits if clarity is wanted and desired.
I mean, I'm wondering, the description starts with design and construction, so.
The repair would be design and construction as well.
This, a repair would be a construction project as well.
Do we
I'm
have,
happy to make edits.
do we have the 4.1 million above it
Do we have,
for the town center improvement?
let me just catch up with you.
The outside funding.
For
4.1.
town center phase 3? No, we do not have all the outside funding for town center phase 3 either.
Okay.
And that's likely to be higher, but not according to our 23-28 CIP.
In the past, some prior versions, we did committed and planned money we had on hand, money versus we didn't have, but we were going to go ask for, and just split it up that way. But that would be more for us than for the state. They and I'd leave it off because they may come back and say, well, why are you asking for 9 when you have 8 on here? Yeah.
And then one more question.
Yes, Mayor.
So on number 10, which is the Snoqualmie Parkway rail crossing improvements, you're indicating State Route 18. Should it be 202 or the Parkway?
It's discussing traffic that is flowing north towards State Route 18, I believe. It's significant impacts from people intending to connect to State Route 18. That's, I believe, what that first sentence is intending.
Which line are we on?
It is railroad crossing number 10 on the tip. If you go to the main description, the first sentence, this project will improve safety at this railroad crossing of the principal arterial roadway that receives significant northbound traffic from SR 18. So the traffic coming from SR 18 going northbound along the Parkway and then eventually into the intersection at the Parkway and 202 is what that is intended to describe.
Okay.
And you're right.
We can move it forward and we'll introduce the edited version at the Monday meeting.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Let's see. Next up for discussion, introduction of the utility rate schedule. Really, you thought
It's
you
a
got to
Dylan
sit down?
heavy week.
We'll get you a chair.
I know. Can we lower this podium, please? Yeah. Okay, so the utility rate study, long awaited, very exciting. We have been working diligently in the background to get ourselves up to speed with FCS Group, who's the consultant that we hired to conduct the rate study. This is going to look in so many ways similar to the fiscal health review that we did back in November. And that was a shorter term review. It didn't look long and wide. It didn't try to make all these corrections for inaccuracies and actuals versus budgets and things of that nature. And this version of the rate study will look to do that. So we are in the process of reviewing all this material right now, along with the utility CIP, making corrections year to year or biennium to biennium, CIP to CIP, and trying to make sure that we have the most reflective of our future goals for all three of the utilities as possible. What is going to be coming to you, not this meeting, and I'll explain why in a sec, but to council meeting is a overview and a review of the utility rate study. It's going to go through the impacts, the process, how the customers are impacted, what benefits they get, and the timing of some more complicated things such as the rate study, rate revenues, and things of that nature. So it's going to do a very comprehensive oversight and overview of that whole project. And the reason we did not bring them to this meeting or FNA is to control consultant costs. The more times we have them in, the more money it costs us. And I would rather preserve that for more of the deep dive conversations we can have later and save us the money. So the presentation is not here for this evening, but it will be presented at council. And that's it for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember some of the discussions, I think back in November as far as, and there was going to be some changes made possibly for the commercial versus to make sure, because the fees were off a bit. And so things were supposed to come in line. So it sounds like all that's
all
taken
part
care
of
of.
Yeah,
absolutely.
it's all being developed, and we'll be presenting on that very soon.
Yes.
Yeah, great.
And that was not really in the scope for that fiscal review. That's very short term.
Okay.
There's so many dials to consider with regards to the utility rates. That was too cumbersome for that meeting, but we will be getting into it now.
Okay.
Or soon.
So
Yeah.
thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
Councilmember Holloway, any questions, concerns?
No, I mean, there's nothing to comment on.
No, it's just to let you know that it's coming
Yeah,
and that
okay.
there's a schedule and get yourself prepared
Is
for
this
it.
like the
'cause
trailer?
Okay.
Yes.
It's the trailer for the,
it kind of
Trailer, yeah,
right.
the preview.
Yeah.
thank you,
yeah.
sir.
Absolutely. I feel like I'm going to be here again. So
All right, next up, Puget Sound Energy, the EV curbside charging.
Yes. So about a year ago, Puget Sound Energy had sent out, I guess you call it a letter of interest or an invitation for us to review possibilities for partnering on electric vehicle charging stations, especially for areas where we have disadvantaged populations. And they have been developing a program to help cities with this. And I have some folks with Puget Sound Energy here today. Kate Harchering, I think, is going to kick off the presentation for Puget Sound Energy. Kate, you're muted. There you go. All right.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. I'm here with my colleagues. We do have a slide deck to share. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and then we'll get into some quick introductions. Can you all see this?
It's showing the preview. Next slide. Showing that
Gotcha.
green.
How about this?
There you go. Good.
Okay. Excellent. So I'll just start with introducing myself. I'll pass it around to my team and then we'll get started. My name's Kate Hartring. I'm a community projects manager on PSE's Customer Clean Energy Solutions team. So I've been the main point of contact with the city staff so far on this program. And I've brought some folks from the EV team with me. So Paul, you want to go next?
Yep. So I'm Paul Gardner, product development manager on the new products team. So we focus on everything from customer and market research that inevitably informs our tariffs and programs, and happy to talk to you about our pole charging program today. And Carrie.
Hi, I'm Carrie McNeil, and I am the program manager for public charging at PSE. And back to Kate.
All right, so we have a pretty short agenda here. We're going to talk about PSE's transportation electrification plan to just give some context on our EV charging programs. We'll talk more about the public pole charging program that we're here talking with the city of Snoqualmie about today. And we'll talk a little bit more about the data and community approach that we're taking with siting these chargers, and then talk about the partnership process a little bit more. So I'll go ahead and pass it to Paul.
It's just real quick to level set before we get into actual pole charging. I want to take a moment and let you guys know what's informing the programs we're bringing to market. And so back in 2019, PSC published a 5-year strategic framework that really outlines our strategy for all transportation electrification products and services. And so this would take us through year 2021 through 2026. And really, there's a couple main pillars in terms of how that's outlined. Of course, we're looking at advanced clean mobility, but really what that means is we're enabling market transformation. We just need so much more public charging infrastructure and charging in general as everyone is beginning to electrify their transportation. And what we do as the utilities, we address charging infrastructure gaps. So many of you might have seen chargers, let's say, at the Targets, Walmarts, and some of the nationwide grocery stores. Those are being served well by the independent third parties that are playing in the market. And so we look at ways to augment and serve markets that are not being addressed by the independent third party. So as an example, one of our really successful programs is our multifamily program. And because those other third-party OEMs, they tend to focus on nationwide, really large entities to deploy easily across the US. And so we can go in as a utility and look for niches and gaps in the market that's not being served well in our service territory. We also look for areas to plan and manage electric loads. There's a lot of additional load that's coming on our system. And so we want to put together programs that can give customers the ability or the option to shift their charging to an off-peak time period, as an example, and we can incentivize them to do that. And then last but not least, as mentioned in our initial kickoff here in the introduction, is we're furthering energy equity inclusion. It's really important to us that no one's left behind. And so with this TE plan, we're committed to spending a minimum of 30% of our dollars across all of our programs, not just public, but all of our different programs towards energy equity and inclusion. And just to give you a reference on what we've done prior to this TE plan, we were spending less than 5%. So it's a significant jump for us, and we're excited about the new things we're bringing to market. Next slide.
Okay, so this is the concept of pole charging. The slide or the picture on the right, that is B, is the traditional ground mount chargers that you would normally see. And the stuff that's yellow on that is the underground work that includes design, it includes permitting, and it's a little bit more burdensome in cost. Now, the concept that we have here is A on the right, and that is bringing the charger up onto the utility pole. The picture all the way on the left there is the actual unit, and that is the dual mount unit. So when a charging session is initiated, the charging cables will roll down after the customer either swipes payment or uses an app for payment. And then those cords would be used to charge the car. And then when the charging session is done, they would roll back up. So the cords would be out of the way and they would be less likely to be vandalized. Next slide. These are a couple pictures of actual installation. The one on the left is the eye level installation where they put everything on the pole, but it was still lower. And we would be focusing on the elevated installations on the right. Our unit would be a minimum of 12 feet up. And that would be to get it out of the way of pedestrian traffic and also avoid the vandalism as well. Next slide. So this is the map of the areas where we could target potentially in Snoqualmie. The little circles are the street lights, and then the black dots are the distribution poles, where we would focus on potentially putting the chargers in. The cross-hatched area is the community's experiencing disproportionate impacts of air pollution in tribal land. And you can see that there are kind of a couple sections that would have potential poles for us to place these chargers on. And next slide.
All right, so to talk a little bit about the partnership process that we've been using with the municipalities that we're talking to about this program. So the city of Snoqualmie, we've now completed a few of what we call partner meetings. So we talked about just preliminary overview of the program, as well as went over some parking codes and zoning laws just to ensure that this would be possible to install. The next step after these meetings will then be community outreach planning. So as Carrie said, we do have an idea of where PSE's poles are that might be good candidates to install, but we really want to hear from the community of Snoqualmie of where they want to see charging so that we can make sure that we're only siting in areas where the chargers will be used. Once we collect all that community input, we would then work with the city really closely to see which of these poles really makes sense to put charging on. So are there any bus lanes, bike lanes, just anything that might interfere with the construction of these chargers or make it a less ideal site? PSE would then take care of all of the construction and permitting interconnection of these chargers, but then we would work with the city to make sure that they're permitted, make sure that they're allowed through any jurisdictional approval, excuse me, and then work with the city on a launch plan. So marketing to make sure that folks that drive EVs in the area know about the chargers and we can celebrate their installation. One thing that I think we hasn't been explicitly said so far is that we would only be looking to site a few of these at first. So although Carrie showed several poles that we've mapped as being PSE-owned poles in ideal areas, we would only be doing a few of these to start, but hope to continue this program over the next several years. And so those are the slides that we have prepared. It sounds like we may have some time for questions, so maybe I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
Yeah. So I think one of the things that we didn't mention is that the cost to the city for this is really staff time, I think. And that's correct, right? Yes, that's correct. And so PSE basically installs these. We work with them as a partner to help locate, permit, and also publicize them so that, you know, the folks are aware that they're there. The PSE will operate these as well, so they'll provide all the service. And we think it's probably, well, we think it's a good deal. It keeps with our our comp plan to encourage more electric vehicle use. And we think it supports our citizens, especially those who are disadvantaged and maybe can't afford to otherwise install a charging station in their homes or around their property. So we like the program, and we want to at least explore to a greater extent whether or not it makes sense here in the city.
With putting in initially a few to start, and what would be like a trial period before considering it's a success and we want to add more?
Yes,
that's a good question.
I could take that. Yeah, we're definitely not the pioneers in terms of this use case and concept. So it started back in Kansas City that Carrie had talked about, that ground mount. Seattle City Light, Tacoma Power, and Portland General are all doing these installations. They're doing multiple, like dozens in Seattle and Tacoma, and actually Portland's, they're doing like over 300 a year. It's a really well received program. It's cost effective way for us to deploy because we're not doing civil and groundwork in most cases. And we can put these in new areas that, let's say, like as an example, one use case that we would like to target is putting these next to multifamily properties. In some cases, properties can't electrify. Let's say it's cost prohibitive, it's too expensive just because of the layout of their property, an example. So the idea is if we can put these on our distribution poles adjacent to the property, those tenants would feel comfortable owning and buying electric vehicles because they have access to public charging directly adjacent to the property, even though it's not directly in the property and available to them. So I think history and what we've seen in other utilities, that this is going to be a really well-received program, both from the cities as well as the community. And we'll look to scale as the market scale. So as more EVs come onto the grid, like Kate mentioned, we're looking to do a modest amount of installs initially. And then should there be more need that's determined by the community and that there's folks saying, hey, we need additional charging here, we'll scale appropriately. So we will plan to operate these chargers for a minimum of 10 years. I think this will go much longer. But for all of our public charging programs, the minimum years in terms of which we deploy is a 10-year period. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I guess it does. Yes, thank you.
So I have a question.
Yes, Mayor.
So is there a charge? So literally, when people connect up, that there's a fee to pay for that? And then how long can they stay at that? Is it a fast charge?
It's a called a medium charge. So it's a level 2 charger. It's a 240 volt level 2 charger, which gives about 25 miles of range per hour of charge. So the customers are charged 28 cents a kilowatt hour. It's a tariff rate that we have. And the way we price our charging is we want to foster more public charging just across our service territory. So not just PSE, but we want third party, just more charging. So what we do is we put our rate at the market average. We don't want to be too low. We don't want to be too high. We just want to foster more charging and more competition within the market. So that's how we come up with our 28 cents a kilowatt hour. And customers can park as long as they need to charge their vehicles. Because if they're truly, let's say someone that's truly reliant on public charging, we want them to be able to charge all the way up to 100% and not limit from a time period. Yeah.
I guess I got a question. Is this expandable? So like on a pole, you're showing 2, but let's say if we're at a location where there's multiple people who might want to, and there's parking spaces available in proximity to that pole, could you mount 4 or more?
So right now we have the option of a single mount or dual mount. Mm-hmm. It is a good question. I haven't actually had that question asked. We can go back to the OEM who we're using, because this is the actual hardware unit that we're looking at. That's the actual unit we'll be using. I can ask them if they have anything in development, because it would be nice to be able to scale accordingly. Like let's say years 1 through 3, we only do 2 just because that's where the market's at. But then years 5 and out, maybe we can do 4. And so I'll ask that question.
No, I mean, I want to know what your criteria or the next step is, and really how you're going to place these. I'm glad to hear your multifamily comment, but also concerned, as in how you will gauge the demand you're trying to serve versus giving one charger where 3 families have cars and they're going to argue over a charger. So I'd like to try to avoid that somehow. But I mean, you've got a pretty broad net right now. Your map is every pole in the city, and to tell you the truth, a large portion of those are inappropriate for this. Mm-hmm. So I'm reluctant to comment till I see what your next criteria is and how to do this. To move forward from there. But further reflecting on your comment to incite competition, but you're pricing at median. If you really wanted to incite competition, you'd price at cost plus some margin to incite even more competition. But that's PSE. You guys make your decisions. I can only kibitz from the side. Not a voting member making that decision. But I mean, the more of these we have, the better.
Maybe we should talk about where the next steps are in this. So, we have an agreement, I think, that we would need to form with PSE, but then also there was a public process. Can you guys take us through those steps a little bit more in detail?
Yeah. So in terms of, because we would only be doing this on PSE owned poles, there actually isn't a written agreement that would be needed. So the next step would really just be getting that community input to see where they would want to see the chargers. So PSE has recently completed a map that's very similar to a map that Seattle City Light used to get similar community input. But it's basically a live map of our service area, and then folks are able to use it digitally to drop a pin on where they want to see chargers. So if there's a situation that I think was just kind of alluded to of if there are several EV drivers at one multifamily complex, we would hope that we would get a few pins maybe in that area, so we could get an idea of maybe there's a lot of demand in that particular area. And then we can cross-check where we saw all of the interest, where PSE's polls are, and then where the city thinks this also makes sense. So it would be very collaborative. We'd be working with you guys really closely to make sure that the city also thinks that the polls that match the area where we saw the most pins are indeed the best polls to work on.
So how do you measure external to the city demand? That being somebody traveling from external to Snoqualmie is liable to park either in tourist location or retail, but somebody who lives here might put the pin right next to their apartment building. How do we adjust for those external EVs, which will be coming and looking for charging services, but are unaware of this process because they're not here in the city?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a great question, and that came up a lot in our conversations with the city of Cle Elum. I'll use as an example because they have a lot of tourism, especially in the summer. So they wanted to think about ways that they could get the feedback from surrounding areas, because like Roslyn, Sancadia, a lot of areas around there use downtown Cle Elum as an area for errands. So they're actually thinking about ways to send the survey out to surrounding towns as well, not just in the city limits. And they're also going to be engaging small businesses. So this is something that we would be really focusing on in that community engagement planning is, are there small businesses that tend to attract a lot of tourists? And would they be interested in siting a charger near them to kind of attract more patronage? Or is it the opposite? Is there concerns and we want to focus more on residential areas? So that's the kind of input that we would gather and talk more about during the engagement planning process.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, folks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, y'all.
Well, I guess I do have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So you said mostly staff time. How much we talking about?
Haven't done an estimate on staff time, but I don't think it's too onerous. I believe there's PSE would lead the community outreach effort. So it would likely be one staff member. Hind has been spearheading this project. So it would be a little bit of her time to kind of support their activities. And I think perhaps our public information officer might engage on this at times to, reach our residents. But I don't think it's terribly onerous on staff time.
But it's above and beyond the normal, somebody wants to come in and put up a fence. It's above and beyond just permitting and other activities. This is a focused effort. And I'm just kind of feeling the question out because from prior comment, this is a for-profit endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
That we would be contributing in kind to. And if it's significant, I would ask the question of, well, how do we recoup in that investment, or how do we participate in profits?
Mm-hmm.
You guys make the call whether this is significant or not, or incidental for the benefit that it gives the community.
Okay. I think part of what we were doing was bringing it to council to see if there was interest and support for it to move it forward. So, like I said, not terribly onerous. I think that it supports our comp plan and it supports the interests of our residents. So in that regard, we think it's a worthwhile endeavor. I think it's, terribly costly. Well, it's not costly for the city really in the greater scheme of things. And we're talking 3 charging stations to begin with, kind of like a pilot project. And then, as I guess the use of electrical vehicles grows, then there's a lot of other folks out there that are implementing charging. We have charging systems here. I think we have one here at City Hall.
Right.
But
and those were brought in under there's some revenue sharing agreement. I'm not sure how much it came into actually fruition, but there was some revenue sharing considerations with that was a strictly for-profit entity, not a utility,
right,
going in to do that.
Right, and there are private providers out there installing these with, I guess, limited or somewhat varying levels of satisfaction.
Yep.
So, Puget Sound Energy, they're, I think, a good broker. So at least we have assurance that we have some, good stations that are, being well managed and operating in accordance with their plans. Right?
How long for the pilot program to get it actually up and running, or for the chargers to be able to use? Is that like 6 months or a year or something?
Can you guys answer that?
Yeah, so let's say we've identified areas and or poles that would be suitable after the community engagement, depending on the permit process, it'd be about a 6 to 8 month timeline before the chargers would be fully installed and energized for use.
And how long does a community engagement usually take?
We've seen anything as quick as 3 weeks, just where and Kate, maybe you should be speaking to this, but where we send out notifications to individuals in a given municipality, and they have 3 weeks to vote just virtually on the map. But then it's flexible. Like you guys might say that, well, we have these events in the summer, and the Issaquah has done the same. So we're going like to their farmers markets and some other events where we take some more time and we do in-person events to gather feedback as well. So I'd say it's in as short as a few weeks, but could take up to a couple months if you want to include events and things like that. So we're flexible, and that's why it's really important that we want to partner with you all as a municipality to what's best suited for your city for engagement.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. All right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, then let's see. I like that idea. Up last for discussion is the King Street seasonal closure concept. Guess who?
Yep.
Yeah, that's papers I have unless you can read that. This is the
Road closed. That's the best I get is road closed.
Yeah, I had a feeling, so I printed these at work before the meeting. The last minute handouts. Okay, this is a follow-up to the previous discussion that committee and council had, working through the details of a potential seasonal closure of the King Street between 202 and Maple Avenue. During the previous council discussion, there was a lot back and forth about what concepts we could consider, because there's several versions and sense ideologies that we could pursue, and the general consensus was to look into a seasonal oh, that's gonna get me seasonal closure that is temporary in nature and is really targeting the summer and trying to bring in that food truck potential, as well as benefit the local merchants in the area and create a better pedestrian space. And at that meeting, I mentioned that I would be bringing back a proposal on how we intend to achieve that, given the location, and get concurrence with the approach. So what I have here is a diagram trying to showcase it. I'm sorry about the two pictures and not having them together. Aerial photos change every year, and this combination actually allows you to see the curb line. So that's what you have here. The top one is the aerial of King and 202. The bottom one is King and Maple Avenue. But essentially, it's the same concept where we'd put these large concrete bollards of an approximate shape and size to that. There's several color options that we can consider as well. We put 4 of them into the flow of traffic. So if you were traveling down, well, actually, how about this? If you were on Railroad or 202 and you wanted to turn onto King, you know which lane you turn into. That lane is the one we'd put the heavy concrete bollards in. We'd approximate 4 of them, and then we'd use the it's like an event type fencing. It's made of steel. That's what's shown here, and it links together. We would use that to cross all of King Street. That's the highest use and access of that road. And so we would put the fencing behind the concrete bollards so that our fencing doesn't get crushed all the time, and so that we could place our road closed signs, tracking with MUTCD requirements for. They have certain types of, they don't allow you to pick any old sign. You have to follow federal guidelines on signage, and that's what this is complying with. However, there's a bit of a variation in design for the Maple Avenue version where we would not have the fencing cross the entire pathway. And that would allow the local businesses to access that as well as those food trucks that we called out earlier. If we blocked it in every way, we'd have to be hand-holding everyone access through those fences, and we don't want to do that. We want to provide this, but the Maple Avenue side is a much gentler usage. So that's part of the proposal. And the last one is a no right turn sign that we intend to put up, especially in the beginning, as people are learning that their road that they might have been using is going to be closed for the season. So we're going to put a sign up there with some notes about the duration of the closure. This is the proposal as it stands. We have budget and ability to pay for these things. They're pretty readily available. Obviously, those are large concrete bollards and they do weigh a lot. And we selected them specifically so that they wouldn't get hit by cars and start rolling around, things like that. We've also coordinated with the fire department to make sure that this would not hinder any access to the road. So as long as we don't use those bollards across the entire thing, they would not be able to get past those. Honestly, they probably could, but it would be a little damaging to their vehicle. So we made it so that they could just move the fencing, which they easily could, or come around Maple, either way. Trying to preserve that access as well as create a safe space for pedestrians to use the road while it's closed. That is the full intent. I can scroll up to the call outs and the details there, but I try to list them as best as I could.
So at King Street and Maple, is the intent that that gate would slide out to close?
No, it would be stationary. So everything listed in black is stationary, and everything in the orange circles also stationary. The idea is that Maple Avenue, if let's say one of the business owners or Northwest Railroad Museum, they would just travel into the wrong side of the road to get into their local access. Sometimes you'll see signs that say closed to through traffic. That's kind of what we're implementing on the Maple Avenue side, and road closed for everyone on the other side, except for to emergency vehicles, of course.
We might sign it for local access only or something like that.
Yeah, they sell a road closed to through traffic. It's a very similar sign. Just have to scroll through the MUCD and grab it. MUTCD. Yes.
I like it.
Well, I'm partially confused that you have the road closed signs on the gate and the gate behind the bollards. So it kind of blocks the view. One gate behind the bollard seems a little bit redundant. They're not going to go through the, why have the gate if you got the bollard and vice versa. But you guys need to, maybe there's an education opportunity for me there. But you may want to move, and that may not have been your intent, but the road closed probably needs to be out on those bollards versus on the gate behind. And that may be what you intend, just not what you showed here.
Yeah, I think I have an answer if you want, or I can.
Yeah.
I was going to say, usually the fences, people are known to get out and move them, especially with some of the, businesses that are right in that area. So they might, want to park right there, and so they might get out and move the fence, but they can't move the cement bollards.
Agreed. I understand the half bollard, half fence.
Yeah.
I don't understand the half bollard full fence. Unless the part of the fence behind the bollards is just meant as an anchor for the part of the fence that's not exposed by the bollard. But then I'm stuck at King Street where it's only bollard and fence for half of it, and it seems overkill.
Fence, yeah, on the other.
But I'm nitpicking on a fence at this stage, guys. So
I
take
think
it and do what you want.
yeah, it's because it's a temporary solution, as kind of a tester, we want it to be visible. The bollards are generally visible, but people hit bollards. So, I mean, the more visible obstacle that we can place, we think the less likely it is that people will run into our bollards. So part of it is to, sign it and make it as visible as possible. We do need to provide access for fire and emergency services. So the fence still provides for that, yet still gives us a visual barrier. From the Maple side, we want to be able to make it easy access for service trucks, to access those businesses. So that was kind of our best attempt at this point, although we are certainly open to other ideas. But figure this is a good conversation starter, and we'd suggest this and consider other options if you have some.
Can I add to Jeff's comment?
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a height thing going on here too. The bollards are 2 feet or a touch more height, and the fencing is much higher, which when we mount the road close sign, it will be between the bollards and higher to put it in more visual line with a car as it's coming up.
The scale between the two.
We could also put flowers on the top of the bollards and things like that. We'll work that out with Nicole, as she already had ideas about this as I showed her this concept. So I'm sure there will be some beautification efforts there. But
And when is this? When?
Yeah, that was my question.
if you get concurrence, we'll start.
We can do
We'll
it soon.
buy it on Thursday. Yeah, these are not very expensive items. It's just a bunch of them. And so it's within the director's spending authority.
And this is summer.
It's
Or summer, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Event season, essentially.
What are we gonna do with the bollards in the winter?
We'll move them, probably store them close to the site. We can find locations on site to store them.
Okay.
Sounds good.
We do use that area down there during the winter for trees and things. But okay.
But we can place them out of the way and decorate them.
Light them up. Very good.
We could consider, depending on how difficult they are, to move using them for other events that use that road, even in the winter. But I think we first need to navigate the difficulty of moving these.
We partially selected these because they are easily movable with a forklift, and we have a forklift at Public Works, so we can move them around. I think Richard offered to store them, at least some of them, at his location.
Okay.
Oh, great. I think it's a great idea. Very good.
Was the intent to have this discussion at council and?
Yes, and to get.
I did not actually put it on for council. It's technically not necessary. If you have concurrence, the meeting already happened at council. They gave us kind of the go ahead to start. But I said that I would come back for like a visual concurrence with Public Works, but that's all that I think is required. So I did not put it on the council agenda, but happy to do whatever we should.
Can we send it forward on the consent agenda?
Well, we can have the discussion. Can we get a digital copy of this?
Yes,
In
definitely.
email? Have discussion at council just to say, had discussion in Parks Public Works, we're gonna move forward with temporary closure along these lines. And just do it as a pop-up. No big deal.
Okay.
Don't purchase until after the next council meeting then. Don't click the pay now button.
Well, no, what I'm skating around is I don't want you taking direction from just the committee or an individual council member to go do something. Okay. But as you stated, this is within the appropriation or spending level of the director.
Mhm.
So
And I just want concurrence from council that you guys like this idea.
then we take it to council and we have that discussion.
Right.
We like it. We like it.
Okay.
Well, in the essence of time, I think we'll pass on the director's reports for now and make a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second. They're adjourned.